We talk about government, we talk about wastage a lot, don't we? Where is money wasted? And every time you come up with another example of it, the riposte from the good and the great is always, well, in the grander scale, it's not that much money, so it doesn't really matter. Well, yes, it does matter when it's other people's money, so that's the first point. But the second point is if you add them all up collectively across, and I'm just talking about government here, you could go into all sorts of areas, but local government, and they, believe me, they are a crime scene for wastage in local government. I mean, how those chances have got away with it for so long, I don't know. Because all the eyes are on what happens in Westminster, maybe in Holyrood, maybe in the Senedd as well, in Wales. But local authorities have got a PhD in wasting taxpayers' money. And at Westminster, it's a similar story. You add all of that up together, and it's not a small amount, it becomes massive. And I was reminded again of that when looking at this story that Parliament is now hiring new diversity managers on almost 70,000 quid a year, despite the government ordering the civil service to scrap these kind of roles. And it's interesting, isn't it? As diversity has improved, and that's a good thing, it's that same thing again. As it improves, people go, no, we want more managers then. Well, we're already on the journey here. The House of Lords and the House of Commons are both advertising for new inclusion jobs. Half a dozen quangos and arm's-length bodies are also actively advertising for equality staff on big salaries, again funded by the taxpayer. Meanwhile, the Commons is hiring a senior inclusion and diversity manager on 56,180 quid, going up to 66,497 a year, who will have a focus on race and ethnicity. Joining us to discuss this, Investigations Campaign Manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, is Joanna Marchong. Joanna, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
I thought I stopped doing these stories like 5 years ago, but apparently not. They are alive and well and kicking down there at Westminster.
Well, as you said, it's another sigh-worthy case of, counterproductive and wasteful spending in Whitehall, especially when there are more important things to focus on. EDI roles are eye-wateringly expensive now. They have a spin about them where we think that we're just going to constantly keep needing them. But when is enough enough? When will we reach the moment where you think, actually, these aren't helping, they're actually becoming more counterproductive? EDI managers are bringing in initiatives like unconscious bias training, but academic research has followed it up, saying, actually, if you tell someone to not focus on something, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to focus on it, and they're going to pick apart the differences, overthink and overcomplicate things, and it will make the entire situation worse rather than better.
Yeah, and I in another life, I wish I would start a critical race theory kind of company that went knocking on doors. Because I swear, Joanna, they just say to these people, we've got a great package here so that we can teach your staff not to be mad racists, which is a question that shouldn't really exist in that sense. And of course, big corporations go, well, that's a great idea, isn't it? We don't want any racists in our company. In you cut, how much is it? 10,000 quid per member of state. Come in. And this is the sort of eye-watering money we're talking about. But of course, it becomes more poignant and disturbing when we're talking about taxpayers' money for something that the last time I looked is either counterproductive or completely and utterly futile.
No, exactly. And you make all the right points. Whilst equality and inclusion in workplaces is very important, and it's a goal we all have to strive towards to make sure the working space is fair, there are ways to go about it. And having an entire role with sometimes salaries over, like doubling the average salary of someone working in the UK, it kind of seems counterproductive and also inefficient to have these people. Someone from the Human Resources Department could easily take it on board as part of their daily tasks.
True. I was going to say, yeah, there is a department that's kind of in that ballpark anyway, right?
Exactly. It's just more special privileges that, whilst they sound good on paper, really don't necessarily do the right job. And Parliament and Whitehall have so many other things that they need to be spending on. For example, something as silly as the refurbishment that is apparently going to cost them around £22 billion. You have other small-scale things and very and initiatives that will have concrete conclusions and outcomes, that would be more worthwhile seeing than something on paper or a figure.
Does anyone know what these guys do all day, by the way? I mean, do they, presumably they come to work. Well, in fact, as far as when I looked at the ads, I don't even think you have to go to work, because some of it is working from home, and okay, it's the world we now live in. But you wake up in the morning, whether you go to work or sit on the sofa, whatever you do, and then what do you say? I desire more inclusion, and I've spotted a lack of inclusion. We need more people who are Polish working in the catering department. What's the job? I mean, we see the job description. What happens in practice? Do we know?
Well, that's the funny thing. We actually don't concretely know exactly what they do all day. They have very niche, specific jobs that really you begin questioning whether they have enough work to fill an entire year. And then you get the second point, which is, are they focusing on the right things? So are we now hiring people to make the workplace more biased, where we are filling quotas and checking boxes rather than actually filtering people based on skill and talent and, workplace ethos and, how hardworking they are, for example?
I mean, and what I find strange is that, in these areas, I mean, this country, when it comes to caring about, inclusion and everybody having an equal chance, etc. I don't know anybody who doesn't want that. I mean, that's just almost a human instinct to say, well, of course you want the right people in the jobs, and, you want institutions to represent the people that they look at. We all get that. If somebody was tuning in now, they're going to see, a white middle-aged bloke talking to a younger brown female. That would be something 20, 30 years ago you might not have seen. So it's not as if, we're not, I mean, dare I say, we're not kind of already there in this battle.
No, and it's kind of, as I said earlier on, it's when is enough going to be enough? The job adverts were advertising for positions that were filled before and have now become vacant. So they've been going on for a while. And really, there's no polite way of putting it to say, okay, equality, we've reached the quota, diversity we have, because they're just ongoing roles that will never really end. There'll always be some need to say, actually, things aren't specifically fair. But we don't live in a fair world. I mean, it's impossible to make everything, within the correct ratios and 50-50.
Yeah, well, I've always said, I mean, we'd all like to eradicate racism, for example, but it's kind of like wanting to eradicate any other crime. I don't think we will ever eradicate everything. It would be great if we lived in this utopian, wonderful world where we all laid around on lily pads all day, supping Prosecco, doing nothing, and just all being very lovely to each other. I mean, that sounds like a wonderful existence for about half an hour. It could get quite boring. But you take my point, is that you're right. These kind of battles almost baked into the ideology behind some of these kind of critical thinking type organisations is that it doesn't ever end. That's the point. The dragon is never slayed.
And it's become a wider problem as well, because you see it everywhere in the public sector now. It's not only in Parliament, Whitehall. It's actually, so the Taxpayers Alliance did an investigation earlier this year where we FOI'd all councils on how many EDI roles they fill, what they're paid, and we found that there's about 52 million that have been spent over the last 3 years on filling these exact roles. Wow. And when you think about the sum, and that's only councils that actually responded to the FOIs and gave complete data sets, the number will go higher, and that's councils alone. You had Greenwich Council that spent over £2 million on like 52 roles for the last 3 years. Wow. It's never ending.
It's never ending. Listen, Joanna, it's great to have you on. Thank you for your time. Joanna Marchong, Investigations Campaign Manager over there at the Taxpayers Alliance.